it caught everyone in it by surprise, but most of all, it'll have caught reform by surprise. And very important in an election, one of the few things that can move is the vote split. In 2017, that's what did for Theresa May. And everyone said it was Corbyn's manifesto, but or her manifesto, but it was more that Corbyn's manifesto managed to unite the left vote behind Labour. And the one thing the Conservative Party cannot have in this election is a surge in the reform vote. It'll make things worse. And this does put the reform on the back foot. It also means you don't coincide with Trump. You don't get the possibility of Rwanda having been introduced but not working. So all those reasons are reasons why this is a marginally better time.
It wasn't just Kate McCann, actually, who talked about there being a July election. Danny Finkelstein did as well. He told our How to Win an Election podcast earlier this week that a July election was on the cards, and lo, it came to pass. Such is the wisdom of Danny Finkelstein. He joins us now. Morning, Danny.
Good morning. Good morning.
You had heard rumours of this. You've made the case in the Times why this was probably the right decision. Do you want to explain that to us? I've got some thoughts on it, but it's an interesting case you're making.
Let's start with this. Almost everybody who says this is a terrible idea is making an assumption that there was a very good date available if only Rishi Sunak had waited for it. But I think we all know that any date's going to be very difficult. So almost all the arguments that apply against the July date apply against an October date. Why is this a marginally better moment to pick? I think, first of all, because it'll be a time for a change election. Rishi Sunak has calculated that he doesn't want to allow that to build. Certainly my conclusion in 1997 was that we didn't gain an advantage by carrying on as long as we possibly could. We were waiting for something to turn up, but actually a lot of the things that turned up were bad things.
Yeah.
So they reduced our votes. They made it more difficult for us to get elected. And when governments are in power, the things that happen often rebound against them. So I think that's a calculation. Look, there is a possible argument on the economy that waiting until the autumn it might be marginally better. But I think they've realised that they're not. That people aren't buying that particularly, and so they have opted for another advantage, which is this does put everybody's caught on the hop. A friend of mine called. He was in Japan yesterday, and he's got election decisions to make. So it caught everyone in it by surprise. But most of all, it'll have caught reform by surprise, and very important in an election. One of the few things that can move is the vote split. In 2017, that's what did for Theresa May. And everyone said it was Corbyn's manifesto, but or her manifesto, but it was more that Corbyn's manifesto managed to unite the left vote behind Labour. And the one thing the Conservative Party cannot have in this election is a surge in the reform vote. It'll make things worse. And this does put the reform on the back foot. It also means you don't coincide with Trump. You don't get the possibility of Rwanda having been introduced but not working. So all those reasons are reasons why this is a marginally better time.
I guess the thing I think they're all very fair points, and it may be that this is the least bad option, and that's what we've got to settle on. It strikes me that the economic argument, which is going to be so crucial to this election, is weakened, though, because if the case is we've made some tough decisions, we've turned the corner, we're making things better, you're going to feel better, then if that were true, people will feel even better in October and November than they do in May and June. And that seems to me to be the problem, that if they're trying to say things are getting better, why would you not wait till they got a little bit better still?
Because of these other reasons.
Yeah.
It depends. So the thing about political decisions is that there's always good arguments for both sides, and that's why we could argue about this all morning and never reach a resolution. And ultimately, the Prime Minister has to pick. By the way, reflecting on the fact this is quite a brave decision, now that he's made it in July, there'll be some people who then say, well, the reason they haven't done well is Rishi Sunak picked July. Yeah. So he's taking more of the burden on himself. Quite a bold thing to do. And I actually must admit, I'm a friend of his, and but I've been quite favourably impressed that he's made a bold decision of this kind, because it does take it on himself. A bit like, everyone still talks about Jim Callaghan's decision in 1978. Well, not everyone, but people do occasionally still talk
people you hang out with, Daddy.
I know. The other day on the podcast, we ended up having an argument about Eric Heffer, because Polly was too young, really, to have encountered Eric Heffer, and I was completely horrified. I live in a completely nerdy world.
You do, that's right. Labour are going on a campaign for change. We had Pat McFadden on, he said change 9 times. Keir Starmer's already released a video saying the word change, change, change. If you could distill the Tory message down to a phrase, and I know obviously this is not how politics works, but it's kind of how it still works. How do you do that? Because what's the elevator pitch for the Tory government in this election?
Well, it seems like they're trying to do Britain's on the right track, don't turn back. I think they're going to struggle with it because, all the 3 election campaigns that are available, Britain's it's time for a change, it's better to the devil you know, and Britain's on the right track, don't turn back, have major flaws for the Conservatives. That is clearly what they're going to do. I think the element of don't turn back, I think a big emphasis of the Tory campaign is going to be Keir Starmer doesn't have a plan. So the way that I satirised their message, but I think it's actually quite a ruthless and effective message for Labour, is this country is completely broken, let's do nothing about it, right? So they want change, but they don't want to give people the idea that change to Labour could be scary. So their way of doing that is to say as little as possible about the change. That is their vulnerability.
Yeah.
People have a combination of feeling, look, I don't really know what these people will do. Do they have a plan, or worse still, they don't have a plan, or worse still, they have one and they're not telling me what it is. So that is clearly the area that the Conservatives can press on. The thing is that I think it's quite a well-honed message, quite a careful message. People want both those things. So if I were Labour, I wouldn't allow myself to get pushed off it. They might get a bit nervous with this, you should have a plan, you should have a plan, you should have a plan. But from a purely electoral point of view, I wouldn't come up with one.
No, that's very change but boring is kind of what you're saying, and maybe that's going to be good enough to win. Danny Finkelstein, great to speak to you as ever. A great piece in the Times today, great asset to the Times, and of course Times Radio. Make sure you're listening to How to Win an Election podcast.